you yourself used to be a user of your own app as well. Like you went on over 100 first dates, over 5 to 6 years through Coffee Meets Bagel. Can you tell us about how it all went? And are there any like personal learnings from that experience?
Oh my God, so much personal learnings.
Welcome to Proudly Asian, a podcast series that tells bold and proud stories of Asians by Asians. I'm Isabel Wong, a financial journalist who wants to uncover the many Asian stories around us that are waiting to be told. There's never just one way to look at Asians. This podcast will take you through a deep dive into the life stories, struggles, and triumphs of young Asians around the world. On today's episode, we have Dawoon Kang, the co-founder and chief dating officer of dating app Coffee Meets Bagel. Born and raised in South Korea and educated in the US from high school onward, Dawoon and her sisters head up one of the most popular online dating companies of recent years. She talks to us about dating trends and how stereotypes in dating can be addressed by technology. Welcome back to Proudly Asian, everyone, and happy Valentine's Day. No matter where you are and whether or not you're single, I hope you all find some time on this occasion that celebrates all forms of love, to feel the love that already surrounds you. But for this episode, we have invited a very special guest who herself is in the business of love. She's the founder of one of the OG online dating apps when online dating first became the norm for a lot of young people. So welcome to Proudly Asian, Dawoon. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. Happy Valentine's Day.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. And just out of curiosity, where are you currently based?
I am recording out of Cascais, Portugal.
Oh, wow. Because initially when I was organizing this episode with you, I saw that on your LinkedIn, it says that you're based in Hawaii. And then you told me that you're working Eastern time. So I was like, oh, wow, like I'm so curious where you're based. But wow, Portugal. Is the weather nice there?
Today is raining, but usually it's very sunny and reminds me a lot of Northern California, which is where we started, where our home base was before COVID hit.
Now, for us to get started with the conversation, I've been so curious about your background and your story with Coffee Meets Bagel, and obviously the founding story, and also maybe get some views from you in terms of whether or not technology can also help solve some of the issues, for example, like biases or stereotypes that exist for different communities around the world. But before we get into that conversation, I would like to, for our listeners to get to know more about your background. So why don't we start with a question that I ask every single guest of mine on Proudly Asian. Dawoon, who are you? What are you? And where did you grow up?
I guess I'm many things at this point. I'm the founder of Coffee Meets Bagel, a dating app for people looking for serious relationship where at this point sick and tired of swiping and they just want something more authentic, more real, something deeper. I am a sister. I have two sisters and one brother, and my two sisters and I are the ones who started Coffee Meets Bagel together. I am a mother. I have a 2-year-old child, a beautiful daughter. And many things, I guess. A great partner, hopefully my current partner. And I am originally from Korea and grew up in the States most of my lifetime. I moved over to the States when I was 13 to get educated there. It was my dad's dream to be able to speak English and have just the world as his stage. And he never got to do that, so he sent us abroad when we were little. And now I am based in Portugal. I am a big believer in flexibility and how flexibility allow us to bring best selves to work. And so Coffee Meets Bagel is all about supporting that. And with the rise of COVID, one gift of COVID was that we actually ended up shutting down our office and everybody's able to work remotely as long as they are able to make time zone work and have at least 5 hours overlap with their teammates. And I'll just pause right here. that was a lot of information.
Yeah, I'll definitely ask you about how that flexible working arrangement works for the team, in terms of productivity later on during the conversation. But I do know that before Coffee Meets Bagel, your career path during your early days, they were more traditional choices, more like in finance. But
Yes.
have you ever seen yourself building and running an online dating app before, you started
No,
Coffee
I
Meets
never
Bagel?
did. I never did. I did see myself as an entrepreneur early on, and I think this is where we all are product of our own environment and upbringing. And what I saw growing up is my dad and my mom working on their own businesses. Especially my dad, he's never actually worked for anyone else in his life. He started his scrap iron business, which he runs to this day, since right out of college. And so, we would go and visit his factory. He would actually bring some work home and we would help out. That's how we earned our pocket money. And so that was kind of what I saw growing up. And I think naturally my sisters and my brother was born much later, so it was mostly my sister and I growing up together. We always talked about starting a company together, and that we just knew that was what we were going to do eventually. So we knew but I didn't know that I was going to start online dating business.
Yeah, and I remember when I was doing a bit of research before this episode, right? I read a previous interview that you did a few years ago. You also mentioned, because you grew up in both South Korea and the States, and you also mentioned something like you used to be a very vocal and outspoken person when you were in Korea, and after immigrating to the US, you became quite quiet for a long time because you were worried about,
Yes.
language barrier. And I thought that was kind of like a really nice nudge to be added to your interview, because this really talks to a lot of, one of those classic stereotypes people have about Asian immigrants, which is that, oh, they're always quiet and timid. But the stereotype is essentially fueled by, the assumption that there's only one side of all Asians. So I really liked how you brought that up and, reminding people that there are different sides of Dawoon, and you could be outspoken in an environment or like with people that you're comfortable with. So I thought that was really nice. But going back to Coffee Meets Bagel, obviously you just mentioned you didn't see yourself running an online dating app, but why don't you tell us about the founding story of the online dating app?
So we were in our late 20s, we meaning my sisters and I, and at the time I was actually working in Hong Kong. I had just finished my MBA and I was doing my financial career in finance in Hong Kong, doing some investing work. And my twin sister at the time was at business school and was about to graduate. And my older sister was working in New York as a designer. And naturally, as you start thinking about, okay, what am I going to do after business school? One option that she considered is being an entrepreneur. And then that's when she told us, Sue, my older sister, and me, oh, hey, we always talked about starting a business together. We've been working 10 plus years. Among the three of us, there's like almost 30 years of work experience. Why don't we actually just, take the plunge? And, it feels like maybe now or never. As we get older, we just become more risk averse. And so we were like, okay, why don't you, since you're a student now, looking for a job and have more time than us, why don't you actually look for some, interesting ideas? If you come across any, you be our kind of the runner on the ground. And so, we were discussing almost daily, on the daily basis, what we found. And one thing that just kept coming up was dating. I don't know if it's because of our age at the time, but dating just kept coming up as a problem that is really difficult to solve. And also a lot of dissatisfaction with the existing products, especially among our female friends, about how online dating, although it's really great because it makes a pool of people so accessible, so conveniently, but the experience is so creepy. And, there wasn't any a product that they could really rely on to find a quality people with serious intention. And so, that was kind of the birth of Coffee Meets Bagel out of, a lot of conversations. And we, hired a developer out of Upwork, a contractor, started, building something small, scrappy, and tested among like 50 of our friends and got a really great feedback. And that's kind of how we started Coffee Meets Bagel.
How has the journey as an entrepreneur, a female entrepreneur, been for you? Were there any, significant challenges, or did you ever find yourself in a situation where you're often maybe the only female in a boardroom? Did you feel the challenges of like even funding gaps for female entrepreneurs?
I think with everything in life, like just even being a minority like Asian, I think it's important for us to recognize both the strength and the shadow of our own identities or our own situation. And so there was challenges that came with being a female entrepreneur. There were also many, many opportunities that came with being a female entrepreneur, being a unique, where there weren't that many female entrepreneurs at the time, and even now. So I think one of the great example is the reason why we were able to see this product opportunity was because we were female, and I just got the pain point that people were describing about the difficulty of finding a dating product that really satisfies their needs, which is just looking for high quality, serious intent on the product, and feeling sick and tired of wasting time on people with just casual intention. And that is a pain point that resonates with a lot of women, harder to resonate with men. So the fact that I was able to see that as an opportunity, I think comes from my experience being a female. However, the shadow side of that was that, of course, the investor community is full of male, mostly, the money side of things, I think even to this day is still very much even more male dominated than on the entrepreneur side. And so in order to get them, the investors, to understand, hey, this is actually a legit pain point that really needs to be addressed and there's a big opportunity here. Well, it's harder for them to understand, right? Because they don't have the female experience they've never dated as female. And so I think it was harder for us to find a fit. Eventually we did. Of course, there's always people who actually get your story. Eventually you can find them. And so I think that's a great example of how there's a great advantage of being somebody who is unique to the crowd, as well as, there's some shadow side of that you, of course, have to learn to overcome.
And I mean, of course, when you initially build the app, some of the pain points that you build the app around were, like you mentioned, for females, is there were some really like creepy or like disturbing experiences on online dating apps. So you build a product with women in mind, and also with those who are seeking longer term connections or even marriage in mind. But for our listeners, there are some listeners who are already married or they never used online dating apps. Can you walk us through, how Coffee Meets Bagel works? And did you ever find yourself having to evolve or like update some of the features of the apps based on the changing needs over time?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, we've been around for 10 years now at this point, right? And so, but one thing that has always remained true for us is our focus on being the best at serving people who are looking for a long-term relationship. That's always been our goal, and it has never changed. And so from the very beginning, as soon as you download the app, the first thing we ask is, what are you looking for? And we're very clear, hey, like more than 91% of Coffee Meets Bagel daters here are looking for something serious. And so right off the bat, we make it really clear what our platform is for. And because of that, we were able to cultivate a community of daters who are serious about, finding somebody. And that has always remained our strength. And yeah, our features here and over there, of course, evolved a lot over time. So for example, the way we actually do this is every day at noon. We used to only give one person at a time, very much in contrast to a lot of dating apps that's like, limitless swipes, right? And the reason for that is our philosophy has always been, hey, we believe slower dating and not swiping hundreds and thousands of people in one sitting is actually a faster way to get to what you're looking for, which is a genuine connection with others. And we still believe in that, but we've evolved over time such that now we don't actually just do one. It's limited numbers still, but it's a lot more than one. And the reason is because it was too hard for us to get that right? Like if we can actually give you one person that everyone likes and there's a mutual connection, like they're chatting and going on every date once every week, great. Like I think then one is fine, but that's not what we were able to do. So we gradually tested a lot with like, okay, individually, like how many people are we supposed to serve in order to actually make this happen? So that's like one big change that we made on our model. But overall, like our intention and who we're trying to serve and what we're trying to create in the world has remained pretty much the same. And that I think is ultimately the competitive advantage of Coffee Meets Bagel. And, this brand, it takes time to build it. This community of people who are looking for the same thing, it takes time to build that. And so that hasn't changed.
And can you let us in on, how diverse the current Coffee Meets Bagel user base is? Where are they mostly?
Yeah, so we started in New York City and then our headquarters moved to San Francisco. So the biggest market for us is still the US, and we're actually growing very quickly also in Asia. So because I worked in Hong Kong for a while, our first international launch was actually in Hong Kong. I knew that Hong Kong, full of busy young professionals, don't have time to date. I knew that it was going to be perfect for the Hong Kong singles here. And so we launched here as the first international market. And so we're growing really well there. We're actually, in fact, a number one dating app in terms of revenue when it comes to in the dating app category, even bigger than Tinder. And in Singapore, also, we're pretty big. And there are a couple other markets in Asia where we're growing very quickly. And I'm really excited to share that in the US, we're really popular among Asian Americans. In fact, even though Asian Americans as a ethnic population in the US is about 10%, I believe, on Coffee Meets Bagel, about 47% of our active user base is Asian.
Wow.
Which includes both East and South Asian. So it is a dating app that really works well for Asian American community. And it wasn't intentional. It's not like I wanted to grow just among the Asian community. But I think the fact that we really focus our needs for long-term relationship seekers, and culturally, just generally speaking, of course, not all Asians, but Asian culture tends to emphasize longer-term relationship, earlier in our age span. So I think that's one of the reasons or main reasons why we've become really popular among Asian Americans, and me also, of course, being Asians and having Asian friends. If we're the early, adopters of Coffee Meets Bagel.
Wow, that's some amazing achievements across different markets. And of course, I mean, because you serve so many different crowds and different markets, it brings me to this part of the episode where I think you're probably one of the best people out there to talk about, some of the prominent dating trends this day and age, because I also remember I got to admit, I never used any online dating app. I was fortunate enough to have met my current partner before dating apps was even a thing. So what made me remember Coffee Meets Bagel was back then I was working for this international business media organization. I remember you went to our newsroom to do one of those TV segments to talk about dating trends. And it was a long time ago, but I remember, oh, wow, I didn't know you can talk about dating trends, and that kind of stuck with me, and I always remember this app. But here we are, 2023, Dawoon. Can you talk us through some of the latest dating trends that you or your team working on the app have observed over time?
Yeah, so I think the biggest dating trend biggest change that the world has seen was COVID, right, in the recent time. From 2022, and it's still going. And wow, who would have imagined how the world could change, right? And of course, when the lockdown started, nobody was doing anything, let alone dating, right? That was probably the last thing on people's mind when they're worried about our own health and isolating and being on quarantine. And, we did that for a very long time. So, of course, that has had a huge impact on people's perception of the world and our own values, including what kind of people we're looking for and what kind of life we want to create. And throughout the whole COVID time, we consistently did a research among our daters as to what they're thinking about dating and how they're dating. And one of the biggest trends that we saw is a shift even among Coffee Meets Bagel daters who, of course, a lot of them are already looking for something serious. So even them, the shift into even more putting more value on valuing something more real and not wanting to waste more time, being more open and honest about what I actually want and what I don't want. I think COVID just really highlighted that life can be short, there is no time to waste. And also if there's a greater risk when it comes to connecting with other people, including health risk, of course you have to be selective. Even more selective about whether you actually want to take the time to meet this person, right? And so I would say that's the biggest trend that I've seen in the recent time.
Having deeper connections with the people that you meet, or like not wanting to waste time, have been popping up, not just maybe like on online dating apps. During COVID, I also watched some dating shows on Netflix, and they are really putting, their participants together with the goal of trying to have a deep connection rather than something shallow. So that definitely resonates with what you just mentioned there. But of course, I know Coffee Meets Bagel, like you mentioned, you serve a large crowd of AAPI community as well. I would like to zoom in on maybe the Asian American segment or Asian segment. Have you made any observations that are sort of specific to the community?
One thing that, again, I'm really excited to share is that Asian American community on Coffee Meets Bagel, and when I say Asian American community, I actually mean Asian Americans here in the US, and also Asians in Asia. So not just Americans. What we observe is that their engagement on the app is overall much higher than non-Asian daters. And so when it comes to chat, for example, Asian daters on our platform is 1.6 times more likely to send and receive a message than non-Asians. This is an interesting fact that I like to share. I think the general belief is that Asian guys, when it comes to dating, they fare very poorly. They're not a very popular segment. But on Coffee Meets Bagel, they're actually one of the most popular ethnicities on Coffee Meets Bagel. So yeah, like Asian data, I think, again, because we have a lot of like-minded people on our platform, they do really well when it comes to being able to connect with others and chat meaningfully on Coffee Meets Bagel.
I mean, obviously, I don't want to generalize a specific group of people, right? But then for some people, they're actually more comfortable in the settings where they're having like one-on-one conversations. And that's when a certain group of people with a certain personalities, they might become more popular or they might shine more in that setting. But that also brings me to ask you, like, whether or not you know of any potential dating challenges, let's say among the users of Coffee Meets Bagels, or even your friends among Asian communities, because I recently have heard that some studies around online dating app users, they might, for some of the non-Asian dating app users, they might even go as far as specifying in their bios that like, oh, I'm not interested in Asian males. So I'm wondering if there are some challenges like that.
I can't say that there doesn't exist. That's not something that has surfaced as like a main thing that we've actually noticed. I guess that's a good thing. But I guess I would say, dating is very personal, right? And who we think we feel attracted to, or we find ourselves usually being attracted to, is also a product of our, upbringing. Most people, including Asians, most people like to date others who they feel comfortable around and more connected to, and that tend to be somebody who shares the cultural values, somebody who, if I'm from Korea, somebody from Korea, right? And so it's not just Asians. Like I think most of us just have natural preference towards wanting to date people with similar backgrounds as us. And so if you're a minority whose that is very important to you, I think the challenge is, of course, the pool is smaller, right? The pool is smaller when you're a minority and you're looking for another group of minority. And so that can be a little bit more challenging versus if you don't have any restriction, you're just, oh yeah, I'm going to just date whatever, then your pool is larger. And so then what happens is you're able to filter more on things like, values that are important to me, such as like, I'm really looking for somebody with growth mindset, or I'm really looking for somebody who is like super adventurous and want to be digital nomad like me, or something like that. If your pool is too small to begin with, it's a little bit harder to filter on those on value compatibility. And so I would say that could be one challenge. If you're somebody who's looking for like, okay, it's really important to me that I only date Korean with this XYZ background, which if that's really important to you, you have to. But then just recognize that I think it can take longer just because of the sheer size of the pool that's available to you. to be able to date from.
I find it so interesting because, of course, like for online dating apps, it sits in this kind of like intersection between navigating people's personal preferences and also a bit of science as well. But I know that you yourself used to be a user of your own app as well. Like you went on over 100 first dates, over 5 to 6 years through Coffee Meets Bagel. Can you tell us about how it all went? And are there any like personal learnings from that experience?
Oh my God, so much personal learnings. And well, first of all, I think it's definitely made me empathize a lot better with our daters. Dating is hard. Like dating, every time you date, every time you like somebody, you send a message, you show up to your first date, it's an act of bravery. You're taking a risk. You're putting yourself out there. You're putting yourself vulnerable to rejection. And so, like, kudos to every dater who engage day in and day out in a hope of finding something really worthwhile, which in the end, what is more important decision in our lives than choosing a partner, a lifetime partner, right? Long-term partner. And so it is totally worth it. But it is an act of bravery and it's not easy. So it gave me so much empathy as I was putting myself out there going on hundreds of dates. And the other thing is, I think with that, of course, naturally came a very big learning curve. I think knowing how to date well is just really about knowing how to connect with others. It has made me become a better leader, better partner right now, better friends, because you just have to learn to communicate better. You just have to learn to be in touch with your own feelings and being able to express that in a compassionate way that lands. And so as painful as it is, and, there's some really great dating experience that I can remember, really bad dating experience that I don't really want to recall, but altogether has made me a better person. And that's actually one of the reasons why I started my podcast, Save the Date. It's a series of 20 episodes that we created to help our daters navigate the dating journey that can feel tough at some point, because I realized, wow, it's not enough just connecting people with other daters who might be interesting to them. We really have to do more to help them navigate this because there's a huge gap between the first date until you actually meet somebody and enter a long-term relationship.
You did mention a lot about openly communicating our needs and our feelings, because like obviously in this world that we live in, it's mainly digital and there's not enough time for everyone. And the setting itself is also kind of heavily reliant on instant messaging. So there's no longer like sitting around and expecting the other person to know, what's going on in your mind. You really have to type them out, really have to communicate them. I mean, just out of curiosity, when you went on those dates through Coffee Meets Bagel, did anyone ever realize that you were the co-founder of the app?
Oh, yeah. Oh, of course. It came up almost, it always almost comes up instantly because, it's a good small chat, a small talk, right? Topic, like what do you do when you do? And of course it comes up right away. Yeah.
That's so interesting. And I know that during a TED Talk many years ago, you mentioned some biases, some traditional biases and stereotypes in dating. For example, like men tend to like younger females, or women like rich men or people with jobs that they perceive will earn more. And at the same time, engineers and scientists were not popular back then, which I think the table has turned maybe currently. Do they still persist these days? These kinds of biases and stereotypes, or have you seen any like newer stereotypes that are popping out in the dating world?
Well, so I think if you look at it in like a statistical sense, and we haven't done this in a while, but my sense is that it still exists. I mean, if you just convert everyone to just a number and then plot them out on a graph, my guess is that the trend is still going to be men likes younger women, and there's a different sort of likes when it comes to different occupation and earning potentials and all this stuff. My sense that it would still exist. However, I think, and I actually really do think this is because of a rise of technology enabling a lot more fluid communication, and also dating apps facilitating connections and introductions among different socioeconomic groups and just different groups in general that you would have never met outside of your own life if not for dating apps. I think because of that, and there's a lot more communication happening between different groups, that the trend, my guess is, would have been lessened. This is just personal experience and anecdotally, but I see so many interactions that are happening through technology whether it's social media or online dating or whatnot, among people who've never connected before, right? And so when you have that kind of diverse connections going on, that's how we actually end up ultimately getting rid of stereotypes and biases, a true diversity and true inclusion. And when you start interacting with maybe people that never interacted and you had stories around and you interact with them and they realize, oh, actually, they're not that different than me. That's when these biases and stereotypes start going away, disappearing.
I mean, just a follow-up question on that, right? Because earlier I did mention a bit like, for operators of online dating apps, they kind of sit in this intersection between, science and also navigating people's really personal preferences. But in your view, do you think technology and algorithms can also help minimize biases? Because I read an article about sometimes when it comes to online dating apps, there still needs to be a bit of like maybe labeling or like sorting of users. So, how can technology help minimize biases and factor in different types of people? For example, people who are disabled, people who are in the LGBTQ communities. How can we make use of technology to make the dating world a little bit more inclusive?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to recognize that dating is very personal, right? It's not a job interview or anything like that. So I think it's important to honor people's preference. I really want to empower every individual to want to select the type of people that they want to date. That should be their personal choice. And so I don't ever want to make any of the daters feel wrong for wanting a certain type of people. That is their choice. And I consider it my job to be able to enable that. But while we are honoring that, their choices, I think there are things that we know on the background through technology that we could make people become aware of that can help them in their own dating journey. So for example, one thing that we do as a specific example on our app, there is a section called Suggested and there's a section called Discover. And the Suggested section is what Coffee Meets Bagel is most known for, which is highly curated, limited number of bagels. If you tell us that, XYZ criteria is what I have, we're going to meet that. We're only going to show you that person on Suggested. However, on Discover Bagel, we actually suggest show you people based on our data, based on other people like you, who they liked and who likes you, all the data that we have. Oh, hey, you know what? I think these people could be good for you as well if you're open to actually looking at them. And so they may not necessarily meet all the criteria that you've designated, but, maybe they are worth your time. Maybe you should take a look. And so we surface that. And we also share that there has been a lot of connections that has resulted from this section, even though it's not exactly, perfectly fitting the criteria that people set up. So clearly, when people actually end up taking a look at these people, a lot of them actually do end up liking and they end up connecting and they, a lot of them actually have turned into long-term relationships. So those incidents happen. And so sometimes our data is, say, hey, I wrote this, XYZ connection. It's like, why are you showing me XYZ criteria? Why are you showing me people who are not meeting this criteria? And we share, hey, it's because we know for a fact that there are a lot of relationships that actually can come out of these people that maybe our users initially thought wasn't going to work, but it actually clearly does. And so I think that's one very specific example of how we could potentially widen people's dating pool. And in doing that, actually help people, get to what they're looking for faster, which is to find a long-term relationship partner.
That sounds like a really interesting feature. And it certainly is like an open invitation, but not in a very pushy way that, oh, you need to look at these. But it's like, hey, like if you have time, if you're curious about what's out there, here are suggestions. So yeah, that definitely sounds really interesting. Another question I have is obviously, political stances could also heavily influence people's dating choices, during times like Black Lives Matter, Asian hate, and even maybe during presidential elections. The attention on a certain, maybe a potential love interests, political stance could be completely heightened during those times. So do you find some of your users who might expect online dating apps like Coffee Meets Bagel to play a role in helping them find love that they can truly connect with during these sensitive times?
Oh, yeah. I know that political stands and political values for a lot of our users, daters are important. So we do a lot. We actually have a very, in the interest and value kind of section of our profile, we make it very easy for people to be able to express that. And if it's something really, really important to you, of course, I highly encourage our daters to use the profile section to be able to elaborate that, right? Clearly identify what you're looking for. And I suggest that, focus on what you're looking for versus like writing down what you're not looking for, because that could actually, come across negative. And, of course, you're not there to explain your own profile. So other people are, reading your profile and making their own interpretation. I encourage people to just stay on the positive side. So this is what I'm looking for and make that be known. One interesting fact about political values, like there has been a lot of research, of course, in the science of love and what constitutes a successful long-term relationship in the psychology area. And what they found is that actually alignment in political value was not the strongest predictor of happy, successful long-term relationship. When it comes to value alignment, what was really important is whatever actually can impact family makeup, like role of gender in a family. Of course, religion was a big one. Those kind of things that really impact your day-to-day life were the ones that really matter when it comes to predicting happy long-term relationship. But of course, if politics is your life, and that is like day in and day out, but what your life is about, of course, that's going to be critical for you to find somebody who's aligned in that area.
For us to wrap up this episode, I know earlier during the episode that you mentioned Coffee Meets Bagel has completely embraced that flexible work arrangement since the pandemic. And I know that you guys have been experimenting with this 4-day work week. So how has that been going for you guys, in terms of productivity? Is it working? And how do you guys make it work?
It's working really well. It's one of the most successful experiences that I think we ever, took on as an employer in Coffee Meets Bagel history. It was a ballsy move. When I first proposed it, I was laughed at, actually. I remember at the first executive staff meeting, I was like, hey, this is a thing. I think we should actually experiment. And initially, no one thought it was possible. Like, how is it possible that we actually work 4 days and be able to achieve all the stuff that we need to achieve? You're always like running behind already as is. And one thing that really clarified, I think there's a lot of misconception about what 4-day work week is. It's not literally just cutting a work day, your work hours by 20%. It actually is about, finding ways to work differently and work smartly so that you can achieve the outcome that's equal or better than what you had with 4 days versus 5 days. And a lot of times it's not every Friday we're consistently able to take. People say there's no 9-to-5 jobs. There's only 9-to-5 pay. I heard that and left at a certain point. But, if we need to get certain things done, we need to work on Fridays, right? Or whenever the 5th work day is for you. For us, in North America is Friday, and then our Asia team is Monday. And so we just kind of control our own schedule and do what we need to do to get our job done. But what this actually really forced us as an organization is to find a way to focus on what really matters. Through a lot of conversation and preparation, what we found is that, actually, like we were doing this, but we don't really actually need to do this. Like, what are we actually trying to achieve here? What is the outcome that we want to achieve? We saw that there were a lot of things that we were doing that didn't even need to be done, that we were just doing because that was kind of the way things were being done for a very long time. We also have become much more effective about how we spend our time on meetings, synchronous versus asynchronous meetings. Do we actually have to meet? Can this be done asynchronously? For meetings, like how can we actually make meetings 10-minute meeting versus 30-minute meetings? Like there's a lot of conversations going on and actual execution of time saving, because like whatever time we save, we can spend it on our personal time, right? It's not like we need to do FaceTime anymore. And so I think as a company, the productivity is significantly higher and our team's mental well-being is so much better.
Yeah, and it definitely saves quite a bit of money because there's no longer money spent on renting the office space. And I love how you mentioned when it comes to this like flexible work arrangement and 4-day work week is not like always just like, oh, Fridays are always off and it's always going to be that way. It's like playing Tetris. It's like you're always trying to find ways to like reconfigure your work week and find ways to make it work. So it's definitely going to be the way forward for the workforce as well. So it's great that Coffee Meets Bagel, companies like yourself, is experimenting with this and valuing people's productivity as well as work-life balance. But there's another question that I would like to ask you, Dawoon, on this Valentine's Day, because obviously you are the co-founder of one of the most famous online dating apps out there. So I'm just wondering if you have any nuggets of wisdom that you could share with us about what will lead to a happy and long-lasting relationship.
I think the one that comes to my mind on this Valentine's Day for many singles, looking back to the time that I was dating and, just really wanting to meet somebody that I, find that love that I was looking for. I think one thing that really helped me the most, I guess there are two things. One is just this mindset that what I'm looking for is long-term relationship. I'm going to commit to finding long-term relationship versus committing to a certain person. That was a big lesson that I learned. I think a lot of times because we want things to work, because we want long-term relationship really badly, we may end up sticking to somebody who, in our gut intuition know that it's not the right person, but we really just want to make it work. I think that was like one big mistake that I made when I was in the dating world. And when kind of ignoring my intuition that, hey, it probably is better for me to part because I don't think I can create long-term relationship that I am envisioning with this person and making a brave decision to kind of part ways then. And so commit to long-term relationship, not to a person, I think that's one. And the second thing is, I think in order to find somebody that can love you deeply and can, in a way that make you truly feel seen and understood, you also need to, every one of us also need to learn how we can be so loving to another person that they can also feel so deeply understood and seen. So if you want to get love, like learn how to be loving, right? And I always say that's an art and science that we can cultivate. We have to practice in order to know how to communicate such that the other person feel so understood, right? It's an art that we have to learn and practice. And I think when we get better and better at that, when we, truly grow enough to be a loving person, that's when someone will show up and be able to love you the way that you're kind of like giving love. So that would be the second piece.
That's beautiful. I mean, learning to speak the love language of the person that you love, it's definitely very important, for you to get your love and message across. And also, I guess the first piece is even harder. Like you mentioned, is learning to let go when things don't work. But I mean, finally, to wrap up the episode, we always ask our guests on Proudly Asian this question, which is, Dawoon, what does it mean to be proudly Asian?
Yeah, I think for me, being proudly Asian is embracing all the superpowers that I got to have because of my upbringing as an Asian person. A lot of my values like work ethics, humility, those came from my Korean background. And I am really drive to make a difference, emphasis on my own education and my own personal growth. Those all I inherited from my parents, and I think it's a big part of the Korean culture values. So I am forever really grateful for that. I'm also aware of the shadow side, a lot of the potential to be too much of that, that can, drive to be self-critical because I'm not successful enough. I'm not making enough impact. I need to do more and more. I think that side also is a result of my Korean culture value and upbringing. I think just embracing both and being accepting that they are part of me. And I think just being aware of that and using that as to my advantage, I think that is, for me, is what it means to be proudly Asian and proudly Korean.
Amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us, Dawoon. Thanks a lot and happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
That's it for this episode of Proudly Asian. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at proudly.asian for more content. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review on wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and signing off for now. I'm Isabel Wong.